Hey, what's going on guys, it's Clever Techie, and in this video we're going to cover PHP functions in more detail. Now just a quick review. We define a function using the construct function followed by the name. Inside the round brackets we have functions arguments separated by a comma. And you can think of arguments as future placeholders for the actual values. And when we call a function, we use a function name, again the round brackets, and inside we have the parameters separated by the comma, and the parameters are the actual values for the arguments. So these parameters are going to be passed over to the arguments, and inside the function's code they're going to be modified or printed out or whatever. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over some function basics here. First of all, I'm going to define this constant that I always define called HTML tag br, and then let's create a function named multiply, and all it's going to do is multiply two numbers together. Very basic function just to illustrate the syntax. And I'm going to use a keyword return to return two values 1 times 2. So what the return does is it basically you can store the return as a value. So if I call this function here and use two values 5 and 6, nothing will happen in the output because that value is is being returned back to as a variable basically. So I would need to echo the value out, and now you can see 30 is showing up here. Now if we wanted to directly print the value to the screen, we can do so by just using the echo inside the function and say echo 1 times 2. And now if I use multiply print 5 and 10, this value, as you can see, is being printed out directly to the screen without me using the echo keyword, because I already used that in the function. So just a little distinction between the return and printing the values directly. Alright, let's go ahead and move on here. Okay, so let's define a function that will print some basic information about a person. And inside the function's arguments, you can actually specify what kind of a data type you're going to include. So if I specified array here, this function's first parameter is only going to take array as its value. So let me use a print r function here. So if I use this function here, print info, and I specified something like string here, I would get a catchable fatal error. Argument 1 passed to print info must be of type array, string given. So if I did array now, name Clever Techie, now I have my array being printed out. So you can use these what are they called? Basically they're called type declarations. So you can specify what kind of a type the function's argument is going to take in as a parameter, and that's how you do that. Okay, you can also have some default values here, like for example, let me just go ahead and define an array with some of my information, called my info, and I'm just gonna have my basic information in there, like name, this is my actual name, age 33, and gender M, and job Clever Techie. Okay, that should be enough for now. Now I'm just gonna insert this array inside the function just to make sure it's still being printed out. Okay, that's cool. Now let's go ahead and print this array out using for each loop. I'm just gonna loop through the array inside the function and print out its values. And what I want to do here is print it out inside a table. So I'm just gonna paste this HTML here, and all it does is just it's a bunch of HTML with table tags. And you want to make sure that if you're going to be doing this, you want to make sure that the table tag is printed out outside the actual array. And inside the loop, we're going to print out the actual table rows and table cells. And what I want to do here is just capitalize the function arrays key. Now I have 2 table cells and the value. Okay, the value is gonna be concatenate and end table row. So now you guys should have this table. Okay, so hold on a second. Oh, cell padding. Okay, for now I'm just gonna set it to 10. And undefined variable color, and color I'm just gonna set it to light green for now. Okay, so now we got this nice looking table. So let's see here. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys this default variable. For example, if I had another argument here, I could set it to light blue as by default. So now this and if I pass this variable instead of a BG color here, we'll have our table's color as blue. Now, as you can see, I'm not using any variable here as a parameter when I'm calling this function. So, that's what it means to have a default value for the variable inside your function's arguments, or in place of your arguments. And then specifying this variable, the second parameter is going to be optional. So now if I specify it, if I say something like light green, the table is going to become light green because I've specified this parameter. It's been passed to the argument, and the argument is being used for the table BG color here. Okay, so that's how that works, and those are the default argument values. Let's add another one here called cell padding equals 10. That's what I was trying to do before, and place that instead of that. And so now the default cell padding is going to be 10, but if I set it to 20 here, our table has grown in size, and that's also optional because that is a default value. So whenever you have default values for the arguments, those parameters that we call are going to be optional. They're not necessary. Now, just to be careful not to do something like this, like if you expect to pass 2 arguments like this, and you're trying to pass cell padding as a parameter, you have skipped the color, and it thinks that you're trying to pass color as 10, and now our table is all black, because that's not how it works. So just make sure to pass the parameters on the left before you decide to pass the values to the parameters on the right, basically. Okay, so let's leave the color as light green for now, and cell padding is going to be default. So okay, so inside the functions, you can also do something like you can have a function name as a variable in PHP. So if I name my function, just to show you an example, very simple, print info. So this variable, we can use that variable as a placeholder for the actual function name. So if I used the same call here with a slightly different parameters, now I have a second table being printed out here in pink color, and as you can see, I used a function name as a variable, and because the variable name is string print info, it's perfectly legal in PHP to use it as that. Okay, so this is that, and also you can print, you can use functions inside other functions. So here I have some code that's gonna print it out if the value of age is over 21, it's going to print out these extra tags here. And what I'm doing here is just adding extra table cells, and then I'm using the function multiply that we created earlier. And inside that function, I'm also using a built-in function called rand. And the random function just picks a number from 1 to 50 in this case, and then multiplies the two numbers together. So if I keep refreshing this output, you'll be getting these random numbers in both tables, which are being multiplied by each other. And the reason I use this is I just wanted to show you guys how you can use functions within the functions. And in the notes here, I put functions have global scope, so you can use functions anywhere in your program. On the other hand, if I had declared a variable inside a function called local, for example, and I said local, I live only inside the function. This is true. Local variables live. The variables that are defined inside a function only live inside that function. So if I echo out local here, you can see that local, I live only inside the function. But if we try printing that local variable outside the function, you'll get notice undefined variable local, and that's how the scope works. Inside the function, the scope is local scope. Outside the function, the scope is global. Now, if we wanted to use a variable which is defined inside the function and use it outside the function in the global scope, we'd use a keyword called global. And now we can use, and we can't define it like this and give it a value, because that's not the proper syntax. We first need to use the global keyword and then assign whatever value we want to that variable. Like, for example, global, I'm all over the place. Okay, so actually single quote. And now if I tried printing global, I'm all over the place has been printed out because we have defined that variable as global. So that's how the local and global scope works. Now, just a few more things. There's something called the recursive functions. And those are basically functions that call themselves. So let's define a function called recursion, and it's going to take one. It's going to have one argument, and then we're just going to print a equals 10 less than 10, echo a, and then recursion. So that's how we call the function inside itself. So this is a function that calls itself recursively, and then if we called it here from 0, pass the 0 to it, it's going to print numbers 0 to 10, and that's recursion, a function that calls itself. So when you define a function, a recursive function, just make sure to have an end to the function, otherwise you're gonna have a problem because a function can run forever. So just like a loop, a function where the loop has to have a condition that will eventually be false. Same is true for the recursive function. Okay, so that's recursion, and then lastly, passing function parameters by reference. And I'm just gonna paste this code here I have to make this video a little shorter. And so basically, the way you pass arguments by reference is by using an ampersand before the argument. And then when you use a variable outside the function and you call the function, and as you can see, all it does is adds an extra string to the existing string. So we're starting off with this as a string, and then we're adding and something extra to that string. So normally something extra wouldn't be visible, but since we're adding the ampersand and passing the argument by reference, then we can modify the parameter inside the function, so something extra is being printed out. So just to if we remove the ampersand, all of a sudden we just have this is a string, which is the parameter is not being modified, and it just has a default value outside of the function. So that's how that works, and that's it for PHP functions. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Clever Techie out.